Because of the events of the last decade or so, Christians have an increased interest in reaching Muslims with the gospel. And I'm joined here with Abdu Murray today to help us understand some of the ways in which we can effectively share the gospel with our Muslim friends. You are the co-founder and the president of a ministry called Embrace the Truth International. Part of the goal of your ministry is to reach the Muslims with the gospel. Mm-hmm. You are an adjunct speaker for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. You are a lawyer by training from the University of Michigan Law School. You grew up as a Muslim. You were a Muslim apologist. You converted to Christianity later in life. And so we're exploring some of the evidences that convinced you that Christianity was true. And in the last episode, we talked about the scriptural evidence that you found compelling in favor of Christianity. What we want to talk about in this episode is the historical evidence that you found compelling. So could you help us with that?
Sure. There's a lot of different aspects of the historical evidences that I think can verify the Christian message. But the central one, of course, is the thing that Paul says is the central historical claim of all of Christianity. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, when he says basically, if Jesus is not raised, then we are of all people to be most pitied because our faith is in vain. So that was important to me to understand, did he in fact die and rise from the dead? The gospel, you don't have a gospel without a crucifixion, and you don't have a gospel without a resurrection either. So unless that's true, Christianity is false. But also the interesting thing is, if it's true, everything else that rejects it is false. So the resurrection of Jesus is both a sword and a shield. It tells you what's true, but it also defends against that which is false. So this was important to me. When you look at the evidence, sort of the minimal facts approach from Gary Habermas and Mike Licona, as they talked about it, and I actually was reading a lot of their materials, trying to understand what happened to Jesus in the first century, because the Quran specifically denies that he died on the cross in the 4th chapter of the Quran. But the historical evidence shows that he did. When you have men like John Dominic Cross and Gerhard Ludemann and Rudolf Bultmann and Paula Fredrickson and others, people who were decidedly not evangelical conservative Christians, who tell you, yes, he died on the cross. In fact, did die on the cross. No one disputes this. That's important. It's powerful because it establishes this first key fact. Then that he appeared to his disciples, and that appearance was so convincing to his disciples that they must have seen something, in Paula Fredrickson's words, that convinced them that Christ wasn't just a guy who survived the cross, but rose from the dead as the risen Christ. And then you have something important, evidence that a lawyer loves, that a skeptic, somebody who was against the certain case, against your case, suddenly agrees with you. When you have that kind of evidence, you put that guy in the stand all day long and let him sing his song. We have this specifically with two people, James, Jesus' half-brother, who thought Jesus was a kook, and Paul, who was an enemy of the Gospels, or the gospel itself, the message itself. And both of those men became staunch advocates for Jesus' resurrection, having claimed to see Jesus rise from the dead, or having been risen from the dead, I should say, with their own eyes. So we have the skeptics, Paul and James, converted. And every scholar worth their salt agrees on this. And then the fourth fact is one that most scholars, but not everyone, agrees on, is that Jesus' tomb was known and it was empty 3 days later. So crucifixion, appearances, the skeptics were converted, and the empty tomb led me, at least, to believe what was eventually an inconvenient truth in the beginning, but became the most glorious truth that I could actually embrace, which was that Jesus did die on the cross for my sins and raised from the dead.